I would like to bring in James Stavridis, who headed NATO forces and also in Afghanistan. Admiral Stavridis, your reaction this morning, and pick up on that point that Ian made about troops now leaving Syria.
Well, let's start with the credit to the U.S. Special Operations Command that conducted this mission as usual, so professionally, so discreetly. We wake up in the morning and a tyrannical terrorist figure is gone. Full stop. Great news. Credit to the U.S. Department of Defense and specifically our special forces. In terms of the larger strategic picture, Martha, I'm kind of with Ian. I don't see a lot that's going to suddenly change here. Ian said correctly that the Islamic State is an idea. It's also a network. It's a highly decentralized network. And I remember in 2006 when we killed Zarqawi, who was the head of al-Qaeda in Iraq, we thought that would be kind of the beginning of the end of al-Qaeda. Didn't turn out that way. That's how the Islamic State ultimately arises. So on that side of the coin, I don't, unfortunately, see anything dramatic changing. And last point on Islamic State, let's recall as recently as last Easter, when they had not a shred of territory. They conducted a massive bombing campaign in Sri Lanka, killed 250, injured thousands, attacked 9 churches across Sri Lanka. So unfortunately, this is not the end of the Islamic State, but it is a very good day. Now, the strategic picture in the region, I think, is unchanged from the last couple of days where we saw the U.S. troops withdrawn. I think that was a mistake, principally because it leaves our Kurdish allies in the lurch. This is not going to improve their position a whit. We're going to continue to see Vladimir Putin manipulating the strings here. Turkey and Russia operating together, conducting joint patrols is not a good day for NATO. And finally, as this goes forward, we ought to be thinking about how we can get our U.S. footprint back into this. And I commend the president for sending troops in. I think we'll talk to Secretary Esper later today on this week, sending U.S. troops in to be at least in and around these oil fields so that the Islamic State can't monetize them. It also gives us a footprint, gets us back into the conversation. Look, no one wants these endless wars with 150,000 troops like the mission I commanded in Afghanistan as Supreme Allied Commander. But small deployments, 2,000 to 3,000, Martha, can be big doors that are swinging on the small hinges of special operations, such as the operation this morning.
And I want to go back to those prisons that we've talked about in Syria where ISIS fighters have been held. About 100 escaped. I know some have been recaptured. But I think about those prisons, and I think about al-Baghdadi being in prison in Iraq, where ISIS was essentially born. He was al-Qaeda in Iraq, and then in those extremist environments, that is where they breed in so many ways, those extremist values. How concerned are you about those prisons in Syria, especially with most of the Americans out of there, and what happens next?
Very concerned. I'm concerned tactically because there are thousands of Islamic State fighters and their families who are in these prisons who could escape and be part of a martyr-led campaign to reinvigorate the Islamic State. I'm concerned about it operationally because of the possibility that if there is no guarding on these gates, you see a situation throughout the region become even more chaotic. And strategically, I'm concerned about it because, again, without U.S. engagement, even a limited number of Special Forces troops, the possibilities here are not only the resurgence of the Islamic State, but also a great deal of malfeasance moving across that Syrian-Iraqi border. It's absolutely still the Wild West, and that could be extremely detrimental to U.S. security.
And stand by there, Admiral Stavridis. I want to go to our Justice Department correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who is on the phone. Pierre, I know there was a $25 million reward out for Baghdadi, but I don't think anybody's going to be getting that reward. But what is the concern about domestic terrorism? As we keep saying, this is an ideology. Baghdadi found recruits online through word of mouth. We all know about the ISIS brides. How serious is the threat domestically?
Martha, that's a great question. Why people at home should care is that the FBI recently said that they had roughly about 5,000 investigations of terrorism worldwide. Of those, 1,000 of those cases involved ISIS, including many cases here at home. There are always dozens and dozens of ISIS followers, wannabes, if you will, people who identify with them that the FBI is constantly monitoring, trying to take them down before they can take action. So clearly, taking down a leader like al-Baghdadi will have some impact, but ISIS is like a metastasized cancer. It's in the worldwide body, and there are people who identify with them. And I suspect, given this news today, we'll see Homeland Security perhaps step up security around the country. Places like New York will step up security as a precaution in the possibility that there might be some kind of reaction.
And certainly into Europe and areas in that region. We've heard President Trump say this should be someone else's battle at this point. I'm going to take this one back to Admiral Stavridis, that let them fight on those blood-stained sands. Make the case for why America should be involved, if you believe that.
Let me start by saying we don't want to be the world's policeman. We don't have the capacity to be the world's policeman. That is not our mission. But we can be part of leading coalitions. And Martha, here's a perfect example of something in the business world which President Trump should understand, which is leverage. That's when you put a small amount of capital into an enterprise, but you gain control over something significant. So here, for example, on those blood-stained sands, we can put in 2,000 to 3,000 special forces, and we get the leverage of working with our allies, partners, and friends in the region. We internationalize this. And by the way, this doesn't just apply in the Middle East. Look at the Pacific, for example. How do you think it is received in South Korea that the U.S. says we're out of the Middle East because it's not fundamental to what we want? What does a South Korean think when he hears blood-stained sands, no more? What about those snow-covered peaks on the Korean peninsula? So we diminish the capital of our reliability as an ally just at the moment when we do want to reduce overseas activities by leveraging with allies, partners, and friends. So a crucial part of standing and facing the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, all of these loosely networked global groups is international cooperation. And by the way, to take it back to the U.S., we also need interagency cooperation. I would bet that this operation is not only U.S. Special Forces, it's our superb CIA officers. I would bet that our diplomats have been involved in some way. Our intelligence community, our National Security Agency. That interagency cooperation is another key. We don't have to do everything ourselves, but we absolutely need to lead and build coalitions like the one against the Islamic State.
And speaking of intelligence, obviously this was an intelligence success that takes a lot of work. It often means someone on the ground helped out, and those relationships on the ground, those networks, are often because U.S. forces are on the ground. If we are largely out of there, the intelligence will suffer?
Absolutely. And in addition to just the physical act, the tactical piece of intelligence gathering diminished because our own operatives are not in that area, both military and other agencies. But strategically, will people still want to cooperate with us? Will they want to give us that tactical information? Will they want to be part of our translator teams, for example, at the most prosaic level, Martha? The answer to that is less when those allies see the United States moving away from the Kurds. And again, all credit, it's a good day for the administration, it's a good day for our nation, it's a good day for the global struggle against terrorism when we take out a figure like al-Baghdadi. On the other hand, I continue to worry about the reverberations from the withdrawal, particularly walking away from the Kurds, as we go forward to try and create intelligence in other scenarios globally as well as the Middle East.
And a reminder to our viewers, we're waiting for